and whatnot, with kids in half in the room, half not. We're getting better at turning assignments in, but we still have to avoid this missing assignment stuff because a 0 in the grade book is a killer. I mean, it will haunt you. Okay, even getting half credit or something like that is better. All right, we got a lot of you Zoomers out there. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen right away. I'm going to encourage you. Actually, I'm going to get you started on Canvas and show you where I need you to be. The people that are in the room already are kind of working towards getting there. So, yeah, there's 22. That's a lot. You guys still feel comfortable coming to school? You gonna keep coming? Maybe. There's a lot of people that are not. All right, Zoomers, take a look at what I'm doing here on the screen. So from your Canvas page, go to modules. Okay, and the notes for today, I'm going to page down to the notes for today that I'll be having on like the board for people that are in here are Whap 23.1 Asian Trade Networks 2020. Okay, you can see where it is on the module. The document that we're going to be using to start off class is Whap 23 Indian Ocean Trade the Gamma source. Okay, it's just a file. So I would encourage you guys to upload those. And you can see your homework assignment is below that as well for tonight, which we should have time to discuss in class. We'll see how it goes. All right, so we're going to go ahead then and screen share what I want to start off class with, and that is these questions. So can you guys see them? Oh, now you can. Okay. We're going to read this primary source, a description of Vasco da Gama's first interaction with the Indian traders. All right. And I want to answer these 3 questions. Is this similar to how the book explained the interaction? So if you did your reading and you can think back to when you actually read, is that what you thought the book was saying? 2, what was the attitude of the Muslims when the Portuguese arrived? Okay. What attitude did they have? And then 3, what did the Europeans bring to trade? Why was this looked down upon, I guess? And then 4, would you consider it a success or failure based on what happened? Okay. So I will go ahead then and take the document over here. Make it bigger. There we go. All right, and got to reshare again. All right, so resharing here on Zoom. You guys should be able to see this. And in the class, we can see it as well. So we'll go ahead and take a glance here at the introduction. So Vasco da Gama, round Africa to India, 1498. The introduction. This source was written by one of the men who traveled with da Gama on his first voyage to the Indian Ocean. The writer's name is unknown. Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese captain, set sail on July 8th, 1497, rounded the Cape of Good Hope 4 months later, and reached Calicut on May 20th, 1498. Although the Portuguese were not really prepared for trading at Calicut, they were able to buy some spices and made a 3,000% profit. No, that's not a typo. Back home in Portugal, the Portuguese called the Muslim traders in Calicut Moors, which was a Spanish and Portuguese name for Iberian Muslims. You guys remember, right? During the Reconquista, the Muslims were in Spain for quite a long time. Yeah. All right. So we're going to go ahead and read the document then and see what we think, okay? 1498, Calicut. The first greeting that he received was in these words, "May the devil take you. What brought you here?" Oh, why do we have people chatting? See how annoying that is? Oh, please. So, the Muslim traders in Calicut asked what he sought so far away from home, and Da Gama told them that we came in search of Christians and of spices. Da Gama returned to the ships accompanied by one of the Moors, who was no sooner on board than he said these words, "A lucky venture, a lucky venture. Plenty of rubies, plenty of emeralds. You owe great thanks to God for having brought you to a country holding such riches." We were greatly astonished to hear his talk, for we never expected to hear our language spoken so far away from Portugal. This guy knew Portuguese, right? Okay. On Tuesday, May 29th, the captain major got ready the following items to be sent to the king. The Zamarin of Calicut, that was the person who was in charge of trade, if you remember right, the Mughal Empire. That is 12 pieces of lamble, 4 scarlet hoods, 6 hats, 4 strings of coral, a case containing 6 basins for washing hands, a case of sugar, 2 casks of oil, and 2 of honey. And as it is the custom not to send anything to the king without the knowledge of the Moor, his factor and the bail and the captain major informed them of his intention. They came, and when they saw the present, they laughed at it, saying that it was not a thing to offer a king, that the poorest merchant from Mecca or any part of India gave more, and that if he wanted to make a present, it should be in gold, as a king would not accept such things. When the captain major heard this, he grew sad and said he had brought no gold, that moreover, he was no merchant but an ambassador, and that he gave what he had, which was his own private gift and not the king's. That if the king of Portugal ordered him to return, he would entrust him with far greater presents. When the captain major saw that they were determined not to forward his present, he said that as they would not allow him to send his present to the palace, he would go speak to the king and then would return to the ships. But the Zamarin would not see the captain major Da Gama. Okay, so having looked at this document, okay, I want to now kind of take this in context for the questions that I had originally posed for you. So whether you're on Zoom or whether you are here in person, let's take a look at question number 1. Is this similar to how the book explained the interaction? What do you guys think? All right, Lily Dole, you're shaking your head. Yes, explain. Okay, so Lily said that in the book, it explained that they weren't impressed with what the Europeans had. Everyone agree with that? Zoomers, are you good with that? Yep. Okay. What was the attitude of the Muslims when the Portuguese arrived? Yeah. Okay, so a bit degrading, questioning, why are you here? Anyone on Zoom have anything to add? Do you think it was mutual respect between the two? What do you guys think? we're not getting too much of a consensus here. The Muslims definitely had an attitude of superiority, that this was their ground and that these people, these backwards people from Europe, were just lucky to have found this and had no business being there. What did the Europeans bring to trade? How could we sum up all those random objects? What would you sum that up as? Somebody on Zoom, I want you to participate. Raise your hand. How could we sum up the strange objects that Da Gama had? Anybody on Zoom? There's 21 of you. Somebody loosen it up a little bit here and talk. Anybody? I know they got to do something. Come on, folks. How could we sum up oil, sugar, honey, basins to wash our hands in? Whoa. Hoods. Man, that's cool. Are those valuable products at the time in the Indian Ocean Trade Network, Zoomers? Not really. No. So on a world level, Europeans are bringing pretty basic stuff that, again, was already readily available and not very impressive. Okay, so would we say ultimately this was a success or a failure? What do you guys think in the room here? Failure? Sam, what do you think? Stanley? Yeah, I think I would call it a success though. Because while the door may not have felt very open, it definitely was opened after this. So the fact that it was able to still bring back 3,000% profit and then come back again with guns and gold next time around, made a huge difference. Okay. And then opened up the monopoly that would completely destroy the fabric of this trade network that had peacefully existed for close to 1,000 years at that point, or more actually. Okay. So this is kind of the start. This is like the spark here that's going to completely change what we call the Indian Ocean Trade Network. And so when we talk about Asian transitions here, we need to kind of go back and look at how it was before Da Gama arrived and then how it was after. So we're going to pop into some ideas. You know, you can write down what you need to. You can, I talked to A-push teachers yesterday. Sometimes they're having kids turn in notes. I'm not having you get like class notes so they're following along. I'm not doing that. You need to be responsible and listen, in my opinion. Okay? And clearly I'm not always going to read every word on the screen, and I'm a lot of times going to add stuff. So that's where listening is important. Okay? Especially now that the majority of you are probably going to be online because of the fact that COVID is, the percentage is past what the school board said we were allowed to be in school 6 weeks ago, but then they changed it apparently. We don't even know. So we're here. Brooke is not in her crazy little alcove by herself. Yes, which appears to be something crazy. Okay, so obviously we already talked about Da Gama's voyage to India, and everyone already, I think, understands that the European interest in products and spices had already driven Columbus to sail west. But Da Gama sailing south and finding the Cape of Good Hope and then coming up the East African coast was a big deal. And again, we already talked about how Asians were not interested in European products, which again had to do with the fact that Constantinople fell 40 years before this. Now, Europeans like the Venetians and Italian city-states, which had become wealthy from trade, had to pay an extra tax. Okay, thus, and I think most of you are smart enough to know that money makes the world go round. And when you're paying an extra tax on luxury items and you have money, you get mad. It's like your parents or you, when you want to buy a pair of shoes, if it's a $200 pair of shoes, but you know you could get it for $150 somewhere else, you probably want to go somewhere else to get it for $150 because you have average to above average intelligence. Okay? Well, that's also called common sense. So common sense is going to lead the Europeans to want to do this. Now, there's a couple things that the Europeans were vastly ignorant of that maybe even some people in the class don't remember, or maybe we didn't cover it too well because of the new way we teach this course. But because the world is cyclical and things repeat themselves, you have to remember that the Muslims dominated trade in the Indian Ocean Trade Network between East Africa, which we never really talked about, the East Africa Swahili Coastal Trading States with the capital at Kilwa, and then also Saudi Arabia and the entrance into the Persian Gulf was all controlled by Muslims, and so was trade on the West Indian coast, okay? And the ships that the Muslims used were called dhows. There was an effective trade network in the ocean. It had been there basically since the time that the Gupta Empire, around 400 CE, had started this trade with East Africa. And then as Islam spread, it just they became the merchants. And that was one of the big reasons why Islam spread in the first place. So when Da Gama shows up with a caravel, which is a more impressive ship than a dhow, the only thing that really the Europeans could do is use their cannonry and their use of muskets to intimidate, to try to set up what we call ports and forts along the coast. One other thing I want people to realize as well is we're now talking about the time when India was organized under the Mughal Empire, which if you remember right, the Hindu princes in the Mughal Empire got to keep their autonomy as long as they paid their tax dollars. And so you had Muslim and Hindu traders. You had very valuable products like cotton, lots of food that was exchanged, silk, porcelain, etc. And they weren't going to be interested in crude European products. So Europeans have to come in and be bullies. And they're going to ruin the trade network and try to create monopolies that were not naturally there in the first place. Okay? Yep. And that's forced by using cannons and their technology. So if you look at this trade network that existed, I mean, most of you, I think, can see that Constantinople was a choke point, okay, for all the trade into Europe. And that I think you guys can see also then that this Indian Ocean trade network that existed was fairly vibrant. But the difference between the Indian Ocean trade network and the Atlantic trade network is there wasn't one group of people that took over and dominated everything. And there wasn't one military force that said, okay, we have to, we're in charge and, we're going to be the tax collectors. It was fairly much like a Chinese zone, an Indian zone, and an Arab zone. And there wasn't necessarily dominance, again, military dominance needed by anybody because trading was done peacefully. Here, I used to have this on the test. I probably won't this year, but you can see what was traded from East Africa, which was a series of Muslim states: ivory, animal skins, gold, slaves still. In the Middle East, glass, carpets, rugs, Arabian horses. And then in India, said cotton, gems, salt, elephants, food. And then China, the obvious paper, porcelain, silk. Okay, so how does that compare to this? Like I said, this was pretty much one-sided, dominated by one people, the Europeans, whereas the Asian trade network was not, okay? Now, if we were in class and we were writing on the board, what I would have people do is try to circle what the book described as the 3 Asian trading hotspots. What I'm going to try to do, without my computer crashing, probably will, is try to get this fancy annotate button going and see if I can, where is it? You guys see which one it is? Here. I think that's just color. Where's the draw? Oh, there we go. All right, we're going to see if I can't find this. All right, so 3 hotspots. These are where basically where the trading zones interacted and met. And these would be the spots of the Europeans and we're going to want to try to control the most. So the first one has long been a trading hotspot between the Indian Ocean Trade Network and the South China Sea, and that is right here. Boom. Okay, that's called the Strait of Malacca. I believe that was on your test, your geography test. Okay, I told you it would come back. And okay, the second one then is entrance into the Persian Gulf right here, which, if you want to know more than you need to know, it's called the Strait of Hormuz. And if you remember right, last chapter, we talked about how the British basically helped the Safavid keep that open so that everyone could trade there. Okay, and then the third choke point is the mouth of the Red Sea. So basically right here, which made Somalia, which is still a country that's highly Islamic and there's a lot of piracy. It's because this is one of the most widely used shipping lanes in the whole world today, especially for oil, if you think about it. Okay, so here you have the 3 trading hotspots. I'm going to use common sense and also throw it out there that controlling this land right here between India and Sri Lanka was also really important because both had access to spices, lots of spices. All right, is everyone cool with that? I guess I can go ahead and clear that. Look at this thing working for once. And I can go ahead and put it up here. So the Red Sea took stuff from the Mediterranean, West Africa, the Swahili, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Persian Gulf, Middle East, and then Straits of Malacca controlled Indonesia spice trade and trade from China. And so basically it set up 3 zones: Chinese zone, Arab zone, and in the middle an Indian zone that really was controlled by Muslims, or Muslims had a big impact on. All right. I think we've already done this, so you don't need, if this is redundant, don't write it down. But why were caravels better than dhows and better than junks? Well, they're faster, they had more cannons on them, and they could travel longer distances further away from the sea. And if you guys remember right, a lot of this came in the early 1400s from Prince Henry the Navigator and his studies on how to sail further away from the coast. Yeah. Yep. Well, and the Portuguese had to have knowledge from the East African traders, like East African Muslims there, because you had to use the monsoon winds to cross the Indian Ocean. That's how the dhows would cross the ocean. They didn't do it with strong ships. They did it using trade winds. Okay, that helped. All right. So changes in trade patterns here, which I've already mentioned this. Again, don't write it down if it's something you understand already. But prior to Portuguese arrival, peaceful trade, no one controls it. You basically only have small military presence on ships because you don't want you don't want pirates to take over your whatever your cargo is. Okay, Portuguese intervention. All of a sudden, the Portuguese are going to force the African in African coast, like along the east coast of Africa. They're going to force tribute payments. The Portuguese will eventually take over. They're going to force Indians, traders, to give them stuff. And basically they do that through using their technological advantages. Okay. Now, I did write on here, I think it's important for you guys to realize that it's not like immediately the Portuguese were able to go in and just take India over. India had a long tradition of military prowess. Remember, the second caste in Hinduism is the Kshatriya class, which is the warriors. And so what ends up happening is, just like in West Africa, where Europeans couldn't move into the interior of Africa because they didn't have enough people, they didn't have immunity to African diseases, okay, tropical diseases near the equator. Similar thing happens here for the Portuguese. Okay, so here's a couple examples for you guys to see. It's not great on the screen. In your own screen, it might be better. But here you can see a Portuguese fort on the west coast of India. Here you can see like a drawing of a Dutch fort, what it would have looked like. So they had to have walls for protection to protect their warehouses. And then they had these massive warehouses that were built, which would essentially house goods. They could keep goods there, drop them off, come back and pick them up. And that's where you start to see huge profits made for the Europeans. All right, so the Portuguese rule basically was in the 1500s. But the Portuguese, obviously, if you watch the videos that I recommended yesterday, didn't last very long, even though, as you guys saw from some of you wrote thesis statements and DBQs instead of just writing contextualization like I asked. I haven't looked at all your class yet. I looked at all the last class. But even though the Portuguese tried to use like a passport system and force everyone to recognize their trade and pay them taxes, secrets got out, okay? They were brutal to the natives, so the natives were willing to, okay, here's a pepper plant, here's a cinnamon plant, and they were willing to work with the Dutch and the English. And so the Dutch will place the Portuguese, in particular in Indonesia, which, if you guys look on here, is an island country. And it is perfect for basically setting up a monopoly because it's an island country. So you can control all of the, you can control movement into the island, off the island, and especially it's not as difficult to control the natives because you don't have as many people, right? So the Dutch 17th century, 1600s is basically their Renaissance, and the English are going to take hold of most of the Portuguese factories and forts in India. The capital of the Dutch world, would love to say it's Amsterdam, and I've been to Amsterdam, but it's not Amsterdam. It was Batavia, okay, which is still a place today in modern day Indonesia. And you can see right here, it's called Jakarta today. It's a huge city. And here's a picture for you guys. So if you look, it's kind of hard to see if you're in class. If you're on Zoom, you can probably get a better view of it. So this was Jakarta, European-styled city, or Batavia, which turns into Jakarta. A European-style city. Very, very, very strict rule of the natives. much, much less. Remember, the Dutch couldn't care less about conversion. Okay, there'll be some what I call syncretism, where like the Dutch culture blends with the Indonesian culture, but unlike the Portuguese or the Spanish, the Dutch were about making money, okay, and maximizing profits. So here you can see the Dutch Empire is in the pink. If you watched the video yesterday too, you recognize that the Dutch were the first ones to settle New Zealand and Australia as well. I bet you didn't know that. And if you ever get a chance to go to Amsterdam, okay, with all the stupid cliche stereotypes aside of, all right, let's go drink Heineken and get high on weed, okay, or take some psychedelic drugs, because that's what people think they do when they go to Amsterdam. It's actually one of the most culturally fascinating places in the world, because they stole so much stuff when they did this, and they brought it back to the Netherlands, and it's all there today. And they had their own kind of cultural expansion because they had so much money. So you go there, the best food is honestly Indonesian food, ethnic food. It's not food from the Netherlands. I couldn't even name one thing a waffle maybe. Yeah. So here is the VOC, which was on the video we talked about yesterday. Okay. Here's another picture. Again, that one's already been on here, but this is the fort. This is an example of the port. This was a government-sponsored company that private investors could invest in. This essentially was the first, except the first stock market in history. Okay. First joint stock company, and individual investors in the Netherlands could invest in it, and they expected profits. And so they didn't ask how they got it done. Natives can be treated however they wanted to treat them. And at the same time, as long as the profits were coming into Europe, they didn't care what happened. Okay. Now, eventually, like we talked about, most of what the Dutch are able to accomplish is taken over by the English by about 1800. Okay. But for around 100, 150 years, the VOC was the strongest company in the world. And you had the British East India Company try to model the exact same thing. Okay. And they could have their own army. Again, they could basically do whatever they wanted to try to maximize profits and monopolize trade on these islands and keep everything secret, keep it from getting out. Okay, if you go to Costco and buy the fancy salt and pepper shakers that my wife always buys, it's really stupid because they come in plastic cases that you have to throw away and buy another one instead of just using one that is permanent. But if you look on the back of it, the salt, the cinnamon, the pepper, all of those, they show you on a map where it comes from. And literally most of it still comes from either southern India, Sri Lanka, or Indonesia to this day. Okay, which again, you'd think that the US, Mexico would figure out a way to make it cheaper near home, but they don't. And that's why it's costs a good amount of money to get decent pepper or salt, not the kind that you get at Steak and Shake on the table. Okay. All right. We're gonna look over a little bit to the Philippines now. Okay, this is a weird one because the Philippines were part of the Chinese zone, right? So this was kind of where the Chinese zone would mix with the Indian zone. And at the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, the Pope gave this to the Spanish. Okay. And he gave it to the Spanish because, if you guys remember right, Ferdinand Magellan sailed there. And it was Magellan who then, even though he died on his trip home from being, quote unquote, the first person to circumnavigate the world, who didn't really circumnavigate the world because he was killed, they give him that credit. He would get this for the Spanish, and then the Spanish would attempt literally for 300 years, 370 years to try to gain control over this massive island chain, and they never really did it. Okay, I know this is fact because when you study U.S. history, you're going to go in and talk about the Spanish-American War, and you'll realize that the U.S. controlled the Philippines through World War II, and the U.S. wasn't able to tame the native Filipinos because they didn't want to be part of the United States. But this was a very, very, very important stopping ground for ships that were traveling across the Pacific Ocean, if you think about that, and taking all that gold and silver that was found in the New World to the Indian Ocean Trade Network. In particular, the Philippines was just a stopping off point for the Spanish, where then they could trade with the Chinese and the Japanese. Now, what did the Spanish get out of this? Like I said, a lot of resentment from the natives. And I'm going to show you a stat here in a second. You're going, whoa. Today, the Philippines are 96% Catholic. Okay, so the Catholicism, though, that is in the Philippines is what we call syncretic. It blended with their native artistic traditions and their own traditions. They don't have as much Latin, okay? And it's definitely different than the Catholic Church that you're going to find in Western Europe or in the United States. Okay, and that's, again, called syncretism. It's pretty important. All right, other attempts then by the Europeans to spread Christianity. Islam had already been there. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world today. Okay? So the Portuguese and the Dutch failed to do much in Indonesia. In India, I wrote on there, it didn't spread well, but the fact is, if you have any friends from India, if you ever talk to them, there are Christians in India. Like, in fact, I was looking this up the other day. There are 28 million Christians in India today. Okay? Well, that number, you're like, wow, 28 million, that's a lot, Mr. Brunette. Well, got to remember, it's over 1 billion people in India. So it doesn't really account for all that many people, but it's still a ton. Like, so you had Francis Xavier, who was literally one of the first seven Jesuits. Okay? Obviously, the name Xavier is going to stick a lot of places in the Americas. He tries to convert the low castes in India, trying to convince them that they have no position. They will never going to raise up, become a Christian. You get to go be equal. That doesn't work because these people had lived for 1,000 years trying to be reborn again as not the same crummy caste. Okay, we got that. Francis de Nobili, he's going to attempt to convert the upper class here. He tries in India, not very successful. He tries in China, and he tries in Japan, and then he dies on his way to China, trying to convert the upper classes by learning their languages and dressing like them. It wasn't ultimately all that successful. The most success, obviously, then came in the Philippines, and that's because the Spanish occupied the Philippines until the late 1800s, until it was taken over by the United States. And they tried to convince them that they were half Europeans, or like half as good as the Europeans, just like the same thing they did to the Japanese. They tried to convince them that basically they were better than the Chinese or the Koreans or the Vietnamese. And again, syncretic Catholicism is what you have. Tomorrow we'll talk about the Ming, and tomorrow we're going to talk about the influence of Christianity in Japan, and we're going to read the Closed Country Edict, which is fascinating. Kind of tells you why Japan is the way it is. Okay. All right, we've hit 12:28. That's pretty solid on my book. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and stop this share. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys what you have for the Hausaufgaben tonight. That is the homework. All right, so we're going to all right, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna pull up the canvas and show you guys what's going on. I'll do it on the screen for everybody. Let's get a share. Okay. So I've got everyone on Zoom here. That was the primary source we read today, Indian Ocean Trade Network, Dagama source. This was the notes. If you need to go back, whatever, archive them, put them on your computer under this unit. The homework tonight looks like this. So due by 12 p.m. on Thursday, November 5th, but actually it's 11:59 a.m. if you look. Okay, just pointing that out. I know I'll have somebody complain. Answer the discussion questions 1 to 6 located close to the bottom of the web page below. You can submit the questions on paper by taking a picture or type in a Word Google Doc. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just open this to show you what it is. So this is pretty good, basically introduction, and talks about the Ming Dynasty, the emperor, and then one of the most famous eunuchs in history, Admiral Zheng He. And the fact that Zheng He could have and possibly did, he didn't, but there's like some historians that claim that he made it to South America. He never did, but again, could have. But it talks about his fleet, the treasure ships, the 7 voyages, the fateful decision to shut him down, which again changed the history of the world forever. We could be speaking Chinese right now, easily. Okay. Remember how I always talk about game changers? Game changers. Well, this is definitely a game changer right here, or a pivot, when the Chinese decide that they're not going to continue to expand their trade. They're just going to make everyone come to them because they are so cool. And again, changes the history of the world for sure. So there are 6 questions here then. I don't care if you write them on paper and take a picture, or if you want to type them up, that's up to you. But like I said, they're closer to the bottom of the page, okay? That's about it. Anybody on Zoom have any questions for me? If not, I'm going to let you go. You have about 12 minutes to work on this. Take advantage of your time. Please, no more missing assignments. This is actually really interesting stuff too. You know, you will learn. Learning is power. It's good for you. All right, I see no questions. Bye, folks. Be good. Stop the spread of the COVID.